Asoka Castle, 1598. The kind of morning that feels heavier than it should. The air itself seemed to watch. 3,000 spectators filled the arena, nobles in silk, warriors in armor. Whispers moving like wind through bamboo. This wasn't just another duel. This was the annual tournament before the emperor, where reputations were forged or erased in a single breath. Ryota was 22 years old, and everything about him had been built for this moment. 17 consecutive victories, the pride of his dojo, the name spoken with certainty, not hope. When he stepped into the arena, he wasn't just a fighter walking onto sand. He was an identity walking toward confirmation. Across from him stood a man who should not have mattered. A ronin from the mountains. No formal training. No lineage. No reputation. No audience expectation. A nobody. And that was precisely why nobody noticed the danger. The signal was given. 8 seconds later, it was over. Not because of speed. Not because of superior technique. Not because of some secret mastery. The duel ended because Ryota froze. Not fear, not panic. Emptiness. His mind went blank. His body refused to obey. And in that vacuum, the ronin's wooden sword struck him across the face once, twice. 3 times before Ryota even raised his weapon, the arena fell silent. Then came the laughter. Then the whispers. Then the kind of shame that doesn't fade with time. That day didn't just mark a loss. It marked a fracture. Because what broke in those 8 seconds wasn't Ryota's technique. It was the story he had been telling himself about who he was. Miyamoto Musashi once wrote, "You can only fight the way you practice." Most people hear that as advice about training harder, refining technique, sharpening skill. But what no one tells you is this: you can also only live the way you practice. And when pressure arrives, you don't rise to who you wish you were. You fall to what you've rehearsed daily. 3 days after the duel, Ryota sat alone in his family's estate, staring at the sword he could no longer bring himself to touch. 22 years of discipline, 17 victories, his master's approval, his father's pride, his village's hope. All of it collapsed into memory. The bruises on his face would heal in days. The wound beneath them had no timeline. He replayed the moment endlessly, the ronin stepping forward, the crowd watching, the signal, and then nothing. No thought, no emotion, just absence, a void where instinct should have been, and inside that void, a realization surfaced that terrified him more than the loss itself. He didn't know who he was anymore. For his entire life, Ryota had been the disciplined one, the warrior, the example. Dawn training, endless forms, night meditation, no indulgence, no deviation. His identity was discipline. His purpose was practice. His self-worth was skill. And in 8 seconds, all of it revealed itself as fragile. Or worse, conditional. When he returned to the dojo, his hands shook as he held the sword. The movements felt mechanical, dead. Taida Sensei watched closely, concern replacing pride. "You're gripping too tightly." The master said. "I know," Ryota replied, unable to loosen his hands. After an hour, Taida approached him quietly. "Go home. Come back when you're ready." "I am ready." "No," the master said gently. "You're here, but you're not present." Those words landed harder than any strike. That night, for the first time in 8 years, Ryota skipped his evening practice. It felt like relief, like setting down armor he'd been wearing too long. What he didn't realize was that this was the first crack in the foundation. Days became weeks. Weeks became absence. Training stopped. Discipline eroded. Drinking began, not to celebrate, but to silence the voice that repeated one word endlessly: fraud. His father confronted him. "You shame our family." "I already did that," Ryota answered. "What's a little more? You dishonor your training." "My training betrayed me." The words shocked them both. "I trained my entire life, and when it mattered, I froze. My discipline meant nothing. My practice was worthless. I was living a lie." His father struck him, then rebuild. "I can't. You won't. I don't know who I am anymore." And that was the truth neither of them could escape. The warrior he thought he was no longer existed, and without that identity, Ryota had nothing to stand on. Months passed. Discipline turned into decay. The man who once woke before dawn couldn't rise before noon. The one who ate simply now drowned himself in excess. The principles of Bushido were replaced with numbness. No guilt, no shame, just emptiness. One night, drunk in the streets of Osaka, he encountered former dojo brothers. Pity replaced respect in their eyes. That pity cut deeper than mockery ever could. By the 6th month, he collapsed in an alley, starving, barely conscious. A monk found him there. Old, calm, unafraid. "You're dying," the monk said. "Good, not of hunger, of absence. You've removed yourself from existence while still breathing." Ryota wanted to argue. Instead, the words pierced him. "You lost one duel," the monk continued, "and because you couldn't face that loss, you chose to lose everything else." The monk offered a choice. Koyosen Temple, 3rd bell after dawn. Ryota lay there for hours after the monk left, staring at the sky, feeling nothing. And then something stirred. Not hope, not courage. Curiosity. What if there was a way back? That question didn't save him, but it cracked the door. Koyosen Temple stood above the world, removed from noise, ambition, and performance. Stone steps cut into the mountain forced every visitor to slow down, not by instruction, but by gravity. Ryota climbed them 3 days after the alley, unwashed, hollow-eyed, carrying nothing but the weight of failure. Part of him believed this was pointless. Another part, the smallest part, had shown up anyway. The monk was waiting. He introduced himself simply as Bodhidharma. No titles, no lineage, no ceremony. He gestured to a mat. "Sit." For an hour, nothing happened, and that nothing was unbearable. Ryota's body screamed. His mind attacked him. Memories surfaced uninvited. The duel, the laughter, the freeze. He shifted, clenched his jaw, tried to escape inwardly. Finally, he broke the silence. "Why am I here? Because you believe you lost yourself?" "That's not belief," Ryota said. "It's fact." Bodhidharma opened his eyes slowly. "And you believe that's the problem?" "It is the problem." "No," the monk replied, voice steady. "The problem is you think there was ever a self to lose." Ryota didn't understand. He wanted instruction, not riddles. Before the duel, who was I? A warrior? He answered immediately. Disciplined, skilled, honorable. "And were those things who you were?" Bodhidharma asked. "Or what you did? What's the difference?" "Everything." The monk rose and lit incense. Smoke curled upward, shapeless, effortless, unconcerned with direction. "You built an identity from outcomes, victories, respect, applause. That identity required constant maintenance. When pressure arrived and maintenance failed, the structure collapsed." "I've been dying for 6 months," Ryota said. "No," Bodhidharma replied. "You've been clinging to the corpse of who you used to be. That's not death. That's refusal." The words landed hard because they were precise. Ryota hadn't let go. He'd been dragging the past behind him, demanding it explain itself, to be reborn. The monk continued, "You must truly die. Not physically, psychologically. The identity built on results must end." "Then what's left?" Ryota asked. "Nothing," Bodhidharma said. The word terrified him, and everything. The monk explained what warriors across history had eventually learned, often too late. Identity is not a fixed object. It is not a possession. It is a verb. It exists only in action. You are not a warrior who sometimes trains. You are your training. You are your daily choices. Every moment is a vote for who you are becoming. "But I practiced," Ryota said. "For 22 years. You practiced winning," Bodhidharma replied. "You practiced maintaining an image. You practiced being admired. That is not practice. That is performance. Performance survives only while conditions cooperate. Practice remains when they don't. You can only fight the way you practice," Bodhidharma continued. "Not the way you imagine. Not the way you wish. The way you actually live. Under pressure, your nervous system defaults to repetition. And when losing arrived, something you never practiced, your system collapsed. Ryota felt something shift. Not comfort. Recognition. You don't rebuild who you were, the monk said. That man is gone. You build from zero. The next morning began without ceremony. Today, Bodhidharma said, you will practice your first sword form. Ryota almost laughed. I've practiced forms 10,000 times. No, the monk corrected him. Today you practice for the first time. Everything before this moment is dead. The wooden sword felt heavier than steel. When Ryota's fingers closed around it, his hand trembled violently. The tournament flooded back. The freeze. The crowd. The shame. He dropped the sword. Good, Bodhidharma said. How is this good? For 6 months you felt nothing. Now you feel fear. Fear means you're present. I can't do this. Correct, the monk replied. The old Ryota can't. He's dead. The one standing here has no history, no reputation, no failure. That's not true. Make it true, Bodhidharma said. That is practice. Ryota picked up the sword again. First form, the monk instructed. Overhead strike, but not from memory. From breath, Ryota's body tried to perform. Years of muscle memory surged forward, demanding perfection. Bodhidharma stopped him. You're performing. I'm doing it right. There is no right, the monk said. There is only now. Again and again. 50 repetitions, each technically worse than the last, each more alive. No audience, no evaluation, just breath, weight, movement. By the end, Ryota was exhausted in a way he didn't recognize. Not physical, emotional, mental. How was that? Bodhidharma asked. Terrible, Ryota said. My form was awful. Your technique was alive, the monk replied. For the first time in years, you weren't protecting an identity. Days turned into weeks. The practice didn't change. No advancement. No recognition. Just presence. Ryota's ego screamed. He felt insulted. Regressed. Invisible. That voice, Bodhidharma observed, is the old identity trying to resurrect itself. Let it scream. Don't negotiate. Return to breath. Slowly, something else emerged. Not confidence, not pride. Stability. Ryota stopped comparing himself to who he used to be. He stopped chasing who he wanted to become. He started inhabiting where he was. One morning, without warning, the tremor disappeared. Not replaced by confidence, but by neutrality. He lifted the sword and moved. No freeze. No performance, just action. Bodhidharma nodded once. That evening the monk spoke again. You are ready for the next stage. What is it? Learning who you are. Bodhidharma said, when you are not trying to be anything. Ryota realized then that this path wasn't about regaining strength. It was about removing the illusion that strength came from identity at all. The death had begun, and for the first time, death didn't feel like the end. It felt like space. The first thing Ryota learned was that presence is fragile. Not fragile in theory, but in practice. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't come with confidence or certainty. Presence arrives quietly, and the moment you try to own it, it leaves. Weeks passed at Koyosan Temple with no visible progress. No new techniques. No advancement. Just the same forms, the same breath, the same insistence on starting from zero every single day. Ryota's body grew stronger, but that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was psychological. Every morning, a voice returned. You're better than this. You already mastered this once. You're wasting time. Bodhidharma never argued with the voice. He named it. That is the identity that collapsed, he said. It will try to survive by convincing you to perform again. So Ryota learned a new discipline. Not controlling thought, not suppressing emotion, returning again and again to breath, to sensation, to movement without commentary. Presence wasn't a state, it was a practice. By the second month, Bodhidharma gathered Ryota and several other men at the temple. Each carried a different story, but the same fracture. A merchant ruined by failure, a former soldier broken by loss, a young monk who had lost faith in his vows. Today, Bodhidharma said, you learn why you fell. He spoke of identity collapse, of conditional self-worth, of building a self on outcomes, approval, victory, and status. When self-worth depends on conditions outside your control, you become enslaved to them. And when they disappear, you disappear with them. You practiced being admired. Bodhidharma said to Ryota, "So, when admiration vanished, so did you?" Modern science would one day give this language: neural pathways, conditioning, neuroplasticity. But warriors had always known it without names. The brain wires what it repeats. Ryota repeated winning. So, his nervous system learned stability only in success. When failure arrived, there was no pathway for it. System collapse, but the same system that breaks, Bodhidharma continued, can rebuild. The brain is not fixed. It rewires through repetition. Old patterns weaken when unused. New patterns strengthen through daily action. You are not restoring the old self. You are physically incapable of that. You are constructing a new one from behavior. This wasn't philosophy. It was mechanics. And mechanics require testing. One afternoon, a traveling samurai arrived at the temple, skilled, experienced, looking for challenge. Bodhidharma approached Ryota calmly. "He's issued a challenge," the monk said. "You may accept." Fear surged instantly. The body remembered faster than thought. Images of Osaka, the arena, the freeze. "I can't," Ryota said. "Correct," Bodhidharma replied. "The old Ryota can't." Ryota waited. But the one who has practiced presence daily for months. The monk continued, "What does he choose?" Ryota realized the question wasn't about winning, or proving, or redemption. It was about something else entirely. "Can you step into pressure?" Bodhidharma asked, "and remain present regardless of outcome? Not can you succeed. Can you stay?" "I'll do it," Ryota said. The duel took place in the temple courtyard. No crowd, no emperor, just 20 monks watching quietly. The Ronin bowed. Ryota bowed. Swords drawn, the attack came fast, aggressive, testing. Old Ryota would have rushed or frozen. New Ryota responded without narrative. Breath, step, block, strike, not from memory. From now. 3 minutes passed. No decisive victor. Both men landed clean strikes. Both adapted. When they separated, breathing hard, Ryota realized something with shock. He had been there the entire time. No dissociation, no performance, no panic. Just presence. The Ronin bowed deeply. "You are the most present opponent I've faced." Afterward, Bodhidharma asked one question. "How do you feel?" Ryota searched for pride. It wasn't there. He searched for shame. Absent. "I'm here," he said finally. That, the monk replied, is mastery. But Bodhidharma warned him. One moment of presence is not transformation. Presence can become another costume if you cling to it. The deeper work had not yet begun. Discipline returned in a new form. Not motivation. Structure. Days became ritual. Wake before dawn without negotiation. 90 minutes of meditation. Hours of sword practice. Temple labor. Study. Conditioning. Evening reflection. Sleep. Repeat. No exceptions. This is how identity forms, Bodhidharma taught. Not through dramatic moments, but through consistent action when no one is watching. But discipline alone wasn't enough. "You are still hiding," the monk said one evening. From what? From the wound. Bodhidharma made Ryota relive the tournament. Slowly. Fully. Every detail. The silence. The laughter. The moment his mind vanished. At first Ryota resisted. Then the words came. The memory broke open. Tears followed, not from weakness but release. "The wound isn't the problem," Bodhidharma said. "The avoidance is." Months later, during deep meditation, something settled. The mind grew quiet, not numb, clear. Ryota saw the pattern, the descent into darkness, the loss, the rebuilding. Warriors across history had walked this path. Losing the full self was not failure. It was initiation. This teaching, Bodhidharma explained, was why presence and purpose existed. Not to motivate, but to teach method. Not how to avoid collapse, but how to rebuild when it happens. Ryota wasn't special. He was universal Dot, and that realization removed the last need to perform Dot by the end of the year. He wasn't the warrior he once was. He was more real, less polished, more stable. When others asked how he came back, he answered simply, "I didn't. I built forward." But one test remained: the place of his death, and whether he would face it. 3 years after the duel that shattered him, Ryota stood once again beneath the shadow of a soccer castle. The stone walls hadn't changed. The banners still moved with the wind. The arena still carried the same weight. But the man standing there was not the one who had died in 8 seconds. This time, Ryota wasn't here to compete. He was here to witness. Bodhidharma had been clear. You don't return to prove anything. You return to complete the circle, to show yourself that the place of your death no longer owns you. Fear surfaced immediately. Subtle, quiet, familiar. The mind offered old arguments. You don't need this. You've already healed. Why risk reopening the wound? But Ryota recognized the pattern now. Avoidance disguised as wisdom. Inside the arena, the annual tournament unfolded. Fighters entered with the same rigid posture he once wore. The same hunger. The same unspoken desperation to be seen, to be validated, to be confirmed. And Ryota saw it clearly. They weren't fighting opponents. They were defending identities. A voice called from behind him. "Ryota!" Taida Sensei, his former master, studied him carefully, noticing the differences, the stillness, the lack of tension, the absence of performance. "You disappeared," Taida said. "We thought many things." "I lost myself," Ryota replied. "I spent 3 years learning how not to need that self back." "You're different," the master said. "I'm present," Ryota answered. Taida hesitated, then asked the question that mattered. "Will you compete?" Every instinct reacted. The old surge, the old fear. What if you freeze again? What if the crowd laughs? What if the story repeats? Then another thought arose, quieter, stronger. "Outcome is irrelevant." "Yes," Ryota said, when his opponent was announced. A ripple moved through the crowd. The same Ronin, the man who had ended him 3 years earlier. They bowed, and in that bow, something profound occurred. Ryota felt no hatred, no need for revenge, no hunger for redemption, just clarity. The duel began. The Ronin attacked decisively, confident. Ryota responded without delay, without anticipation. Breath-guided movement, awareness-guided response, no memory, no future. Flow. The duel was beautiful, not because of flawless technique, but because both men were completely there. Strikes landed, blocks adapted, neither froze, neither forced an outcome. When it ended, there was no clear victor. The crowd erupted. Ryota barely heard them, because the victory wasn't external. It was internal. The place that once destroyed him no longer controlled him. Afterward, the Ronin approached. 3 years ago, you froze. Today, you flowed. What changed? Ryota considered the question carefully. "I stopped trying to be the warrior who never loses. I became the warrior who shows up." The Ronin bowed deeply. That is mastery. Back at the temple, Bodhidharma listened without interruption. "You understand now," the monk said. Musashi wasn't talking about combat. He was talking about life. You can only fight the way you practice. Means this: how you live daily is how you respond. When pressure arrives, Ryota had practiced perfection. When perfection failed, he collapsed. Then he practiced presence. So when pressure returned, presence was automatic. This was the final integration. Identity built on achievement is brittle. Identity built on daily practice is unbreakable. Years passed. Ryota began teaching, not as a master who impressed, but as a guide who had fallen. When a young samurai arrived at the temple defeated, disgraced, hollow-eyed, Ryota recognized him immediately. "I can help you," Ryota said, "but only if you're willing to lose everything you think you are." The first lesson was always the same. Not technique, presence. You can only fight the way you practice, Ryota told him. And practice is not what you do on good days. It's what you repeat when no one is watching. The student raised the sword, awkwardly imperfect, real, and the circle continued. Lost became found. Death became rebirth. Not through motivation. Through method. Not through perfection. Through presence. Ryota was 28 when he finally understood the difference between strength and stability. Strength is loud. It demands proof. It needs witnesses. Stability is quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain itself. It simply remains. On the temple steps at dawn, Ryota sat beside Bodhidharma as mist moved through the valley below. There was no urgency anymore, no hunger to become, only attention. I understand Musashi now, Ryota said. You can only fight the way you practice doesn't mean refine your technique endlessly. It means the way you live becomes the way you respond under pressure. Bodhidharma nodded. Most warriors fear losing a duel. If you understand the greater loss, losing yourself, Ryota said, that loss doesn't happen in dramatic moments, the monk continued. It happens in small choices. Skipping practice, performing instead of being present, attaching worth to outcomes. Each choice weakens the foundation. Then pressure arrives and collapse looks sudden, but it was built slowly. Ryota saw it clearly now. The duel hadn't broken him. The years before it had prepared him to break. When identity is built on achievement, it demands constant success to survive. When success fails, as it always eventually does, identity disintegrates with it. But practice is different. Practice doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't need confidence or motivation. Practice only asks one thing. Will you show up today? That question, repeated daily, builds something no failure can take away. This was the teaching behind presence and purpose, not inspiration, not hype, not motivation that fades when life hits back. Method. Daily actions that rewire identity. Small, repeatable practices that teach the nervous system how to remain present under stress, how to respond instead of freeze, how to move forward even when the story collapses. Ryota didn't become famous. He didn't chase tournaments. He became unbreakable. Students came to the temple broken in different ways, some from defeat, some from success that no longer satisfied, some from realizing their entire sense of self depended on applause that had stopped. Ryota told them the same thing every time. You're not here to rebuild who you were. That person is gone. You're here to build forward. They always resisted. That sounds impossible. Good, Ryota said. That means you're not trying to perform anymore. The practice never changed. Basic forms, breath, presence, daily repetition, facing the wound instead of avoiding it, removing identity from outcomes and placing it into action. Weeks turned into months. And slowly, the same transformation appeared again and again. Not louder. Quieter. Not sharper, more stable. One evening, a young warrior asked the question everyone eventually asks. How do I make sure I never lose myself again? Ryota answered without hesitation. You can't. The student stiffened. You will lose yourself again. Ryota continued. Everyone does. Life guarantees it. Failure, loss, change, death of roles. That's unavoidable. Then what's the point? The point, Ryota said, is knowing the way back. The warrior path isn't about never falling. It's about building a foundation that makes falling survivable. Presence is that foundation. When you practice being present daily, you don't panic when identity dissolves. You don't cling. You don't collapse. You adapt. You rebuild from where you are, not where you wish you were. That is the final lesson. The deepest truth Musashi left behind wasn't about sword fighting. It was about existence. You can only fight the way you practice, which means you can only face loss the way you've practiced facing discomfort. You can only handle failure the way you've practiced imperfection. You can only remain calm under pressure if you've practiced calm when nothing is at stake. If you practice performing, you will shatter when performance fails. If you practice presence, you will remain when everything else falls away. This is why the teaching continues. Because Ryota's story isn't unique. It's universal. Every man eventually loses the identity he thought would carry him forever. Career, status, strength, approval, control. And when that happens, the question isn't whether you'll feel lost. You will. The question is whether you've practiced enough presence to find your way back, not to who you were, to who you can become. Presence and purpose exists for those standing in the darkness right now, not offering motivation to push harder, offering a method to rebuild, differently, daily, quietly, relentlessly, not trying to impress, just showing up. Because the warrior who shows up win or lose never truly disappears. He adapts. He rebuilds. He continues. And that is the warrior path nobody talks about. Until now.